G'day legends, it's Mark here from North Oz, and in today's video I'm going to give you a little bit of a rundown on how my 79 series Landcruiser went on its toughest trip yet, where I did like 10% of its total kilometers. Right now I ended up doing on just one single trip over 2 days, so pretty crazy trip. It was a lot of fun, so I got a lot of footage to share with you guys, and I'm going to tell you everything that worked and everything that didn't work in my current setup. So let's get stuck into it. Today is going to be a good one. So after taking the 79 on its first kind of bigger trip where, kind of covering large distances in a short amount of time, it was really good to, figure out things that are going well with the build and things that we need to improve on. So that's kind of the purpose of today's video. So in no particular order, we're going to go through a few things. So one of the things I've made a video on this as well is just about the narrower rear track. So the fact that, when doing kind of more muddy sort of, and some beach work as well, where the rear track would get stuck into the front track of the vehicle when, kind of going through and creating ruts in the sand and in the mud. So that was something that was a little bit, it was a little bit of a shock. That was kind of like, I didn't think it would react that way. Is it bad? Is it good? Doesn't really affect it too much at that point that I noticed. It was more just that it was just something that I just noticed. I wouldn't go out spending 10 grand on fixing the rear track, as I mentioned in that rear track video, but it is definitely something that, that I need to keep an eye on just as I am doing the off-roading stuff and maybe manage my pressures a little bit better. So that was kind of the first thing that definitely stood out to me from this shakedown trip. So one of the things that actually worked out really well that I was really happy with was the storage solutions that we have now. So we obviously have the full length drawers that go the complete width of the canopy. So this is a 1600 mil drawer that just kind of keeps going and going and going. So this is great. So I ended up doing a full fit out on this. I recorded all that if you guys want to see that and haven't seen that already. So full dividers and everything in there, which is great. And the good thing that the thing that I really liked about this setup in particular was that I did have a spot, one for everything. I was still moving some things around a little bit, but I did have a spot for my camera gear. And that was something that I've always wanted since I first got into photography in general. But obviously now I've switched to doing more video sort of stuff here on YouTube. That's where I spend most of my time. But it does still require a bit of gear, just a spot to store your microphones and, your camera and, little bits and pieces. So it's great to have a dedicated spot for it, as opposed to what I was doing before, where, make sure it wasn't rolling around and all my camera gear was going to get damaged. I would just have like my case that I have for my camera gear, I would keep in the cab of the vehicle. But when I started keeping too many things in too many places, I was just finding myself running around to all the different spots. And then you have to keep, all the doors open in the car because, it's manual locking, doesn't have central locking, so it's not as easy to get into as those vehicles. So I was just finding myself getting frustrated jumping between more than one place in the vehicle. So now that I have the drawer set up, that is something that I'm really happy with, that everything is now finding a spot if it hasn't already found its place. And that is something that was going to save me a lot of time. And I definitely felt like it was less of a chore to go out and do this trip, because all I really needed to do was just load up the fridge with some food and I was all sorted. So talking about the fridge, let's talk about that now. So for those of you who watched kind of like my getting ready for 2025 sort of setup, you would have noticed that in that video, we also did a stand-up fridge. So this is something that's new. I already have had my Mike Coolman fridge that I've had for a long time. And that's something that, I've run for, like I said, a long time. And I bought these things with my own money. So this is a King's one. So trying out a bit of a cheaper product just to see how it goes. This is not my main fridge. The idea is that on like a 2-day trip, which is what I did, I'll be using this fridge completely as my main source of refrigerating. It doesn't have a freezer in it, so that's why I'll be using my Mike Coolman fridge still. That's going to be a fridge and freezer, or maybe just a complete freezer. I'll see how it goes. But on my longer trips that I'm doing where I don't want to be stopping off for at least 2 weeks at a time, I'm going to be keeping my food either vacuum sealed or in the freezer section of the Mike Coolman, then bringing it into the stand-up fridge. So this is kind of like the little go-between And so even if this doesn't really keep temperature as well as my other fridge, that's okay. It's not really a big deal because this is really just going to keep food in there for a day at a time, for the next day, for example. Or it's going to have things in there that, it's not going to be absolutely crucial to keep at a certain temperature, because I still don't have a way to monitor the temperature in here just yet. All it does is just say 2 degrees and that's it. So I don't know if it's actually going to be 2 degrees or not. But this actually did work out really well, this fridge. Super easy to clean out as well, which is something that I really appreciated, was that this fridge was like, you just turn it off and you can just easily clean it out and wipe it out. You don't need to take the entire refrigeration system out. It's just a matter of just removing a couple of the trays and that, and then you can just easily just wipe in there. And it does like cool down. We'll get to, it does cool down reasonably quick as well, but it does also like, kind of defrost pretty fast as well. So if you're going in between trips or you're finishing up a trip, you can just turn it off. I just chuck a couple of paper towels in there and just give it a quick wipe the next day, then it's done. So pretty easy to work with, very user-friendly. Great to keep the drinks in here as well as little dividers, which I also really appreciated too. So there's these little sliding dividers in this door here, and that kept my glass bottle separated. So I went glass bottle, milk, glass bottle, and that actually worked out pretty well. The little dividers just kept enough distance in between the bottles and that, just so they didn't bang together and that. So that was something that I really appreciated. Something else I really appreciated was the fact that for that trip and also for this video, we've got a lot of support from a company called Magic Mind. So they actually make these little drinks that have caffeine in them, but it's well sourced. It's not anything negative at all. Like, I'm normally pretty sensitive to caffeine, but because I'm a pretty hyperactive guy as it is. But this actually is really good. Just gives me a little bit more focus as well. Just when I'm when I'm going to edit this video, just having that little bit of extra clarity is good. And it's also got some good stuff in it too that I actually take as a supplement anyway, but this kind of does the same thing. So I don't really need to take as much of those supplements as well. So it's got ashwagandha in it and turmeric, which things I'm a big fan of, but it's also got a pile of other stuff in there as well. So they actually supported the big video that I did where we went off-road, and so I really appreciated that, and they've also come on board for this video as well. So I really do appreciate Magic Mind. Like I said, guys, it kind of like wraps up that fridge kind of setup where I was able to keep lots of things like those little drinks in there as well. And there's actually a surprising amount of room in that fridge. So yeah, so for like a 2-3 day trip, this fridge is actually plenty. So I actually didn't even end up using my large fridge because it was just me and my mate Carl as well. It was just us going camping. That was it. That was all we really needed, was just this one fridge really. And I ended up taking food for both of us for dinner at least. And I obviously had bread and stuff in there as well. So, but for longer trips, we'll definitely be using the bigger fridge. But it is kind of handy as well having this fridge in here, because it does give you a little bit of vertical magnetic storage as well. So I'm able to put my lights in there, for example. And I have links to some of the stuff in the description if you want to check out them. I get a lot of questions about these lights actually. These are a hardcore light. So they have all sorts of different colors and stuff, and also like little blinks and stuff. So they're pretty cool because they have the magnet on there too, but they also have a little like elastic, so you can actually wrap them around something that's not magnetic. So very handy. Before I had these lights in here, which again are hardcore lights, which if I remember, I'll put a link to them in the description. But these are also magnetic. So before I had these strip lights, I also would just use them there. They would just stick on there, and that was the light that I was using. But this is also handy because I can stick on this fridge, I can use that as that vertical storage. I can use that as that vertical magnetic storage because this fridge has a steel exterior. Also, something that came in handy was, as always, was my little spirit level. So this is just another one that we've had lying around the house for many years. Great if you have a rooftop tent, so you can try to get things as level as possible. The next thing I wanted to talk about was still to do with this setup, and then we're going to go to the exterior of the vehicle. Something that I really want to talk about was the fact that, a bit more of a negative one, was I didn't really have, the charging was a bit of an issue. I missed out on getting a shot that I really wanted to get of the evening sky where we were camping, and it was really nice dark purples. I've got a picture of it, I'll put it up here, but I really wanted to capture that as a video, but I just really wasn't confident that my charging setup was going to be able to get my batteries charged up for the full night so that I would have it for the next day, where I really wanted to make sure I had at least 2 full batteries, because I ended up capturing some awesome shots that day as well. So I really do want to work on some sort of more open sort of a charging setup down here in the drawer, so that I can, instead of leaving the drawer open and running cables, just have like one cable that will just run straight into one of the USB or into one of the accessory outlets, and it will charge everything. That's kind of what I'm hoping will happen. There is space up the top here for a cable to come out. I can also drill something into the side of the drawer. There is a little bit of room for that. So there are some options there, but just talking about keeping everything like, super ergonomical and everything working well. And, one of the things that kind of held things back a bit too was the fact that I did crash my drone, not on this trip, but last year, like pretty much as soon as I got it, I crashed it. It seems to be a common experience. And since then, the batteries like haven't really charged very well, even though I replaced it and got a replacement for it. The batteries in it just don't really quite charge very well in the multi-pack charger. So I'm finding myself charging them individually. So I probably will get a new multi-pack charger, maybe some new batteries as well. And then, maybe, and just run that in the drawer so that I can just plug it straight in. Second I'm finished with the battery, bang, goes straight into the charger, and I'm good to go. So these are all things I'm kind of picking up as I'm going. And like, in terms of camping wise, it was perfect, but just in terms of trying to capture everything as I'm going, still needs refining, still needs a little bit of work, especially with the bigger trips I have coming up, like to Fraser Island and to the high country and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of work to do in that space. So with that out of the way, I'm pretty happy with how everything else went. We will have a quick look at the storage on the other side before we finish up, but I want to show you guys something on the exterior of the vehicle that is kind of good, but also kind of bad. If it's been a little while since you have kind of caught up on what we did here on the channel, but I did released a video a couple of weeks ago, or a few weeks ago now, about the Canopy door and how I painted the door, and also the under tray boxes. So I used like an enamel paint, which was a little bit tricky to figure out, but I did leave a lot of tips and tricks in there to help you guys get the best finish. I'm actually like pretty happy with how it's turned out. It actually hardened really well, and it's quite resistant and quite robust. So I'm pretty happy with how well that finish actually hardened. Unfortunately though, when I was power washing the vehicle, I did get a little bit too close to a little bit of a chip on this surface, and I did notice that it was starting to come up a little bit on an area where it was, it had copped a rock chip. So I did notice it, like I caught it early, because I was like, oh, what's that? Sprayed it and it got a little bit bigger. You guys probably can't even see it. It's there, so you might not even be able to see that. But that was just something that I noticed, that this is pretty hard wearing, but if it does cop a big rock chip, probably power hosing it straight after is not a good idea. So fixing that up isn't going to be just too big of an issue, but there is obviously a bit of a concern that I have that over time this is just going to keep chipping, and it's going to keep getting maybe worse and worse, and maybe the cover up paint isn't going to be that great. But I've got like 2 whole cans of this stuff still left over, so I will try just doing little cover ups here and there. But I mean, we did a lot of off-roading, did about like 600 Ks roughly of off-road kind of pretty rough stuff. So I'm pretty happy with how this all turned out in terms of how resistant it is. The other side did cop quite a big scratch going down the side. You can't tell though unless you see the light on it at the certain angle. So it's not going to show really obvious scratches. It is a bit glossy, so if there is a deep scratch like on the other side, it is going to be pretty obvious if it's, like I said, like a deep scratch. And I might have, in hindsight, could have done maybe one more coat on this, but like I said, it's going to be easy enough just to touch up anyway. And the plain white, it is quite a bright white, and it doesn't quite match the off-white of the Landcruiser. So that's something I probably could have maybe dulled it a little bit with a bit of color. But the white still does look good in my opinion, and with a bit of dirt on it, I'll put some picture over, put a video over as I'm talking now, but with a bit of dirt on it, it looks pretty much the same anyway, so you can't really tell that much. But I really do want to do some sort of graphic on here as well. I think that's just going to set it off really nice. I like to do some sort of topographical sort of a design, and then put a big North Oz in the middle of it. Don't really want to like make it the whole YouTube subscribe sort of situation on it. I mean, I did on my Prado, so I may end up doing that because it's cool, you know, sign writing sort of stuff. So it makes people, it draws their attention to the fact that it's a YouTube channel, but I actually just want to do it more just for the design and make it look like it's, you know, make it look like, give it some sort of interesting style, you know, not so much just here, look at this, subscribe here. I want it to actually, you know, look good and, you know, be visually appealing. So I hope that makes sense, my little ramble there. So for the last part of this, we'll pop over to the other side of the canopy where I'll show you what I did with the storage, because there's a positive and a negative in there as well. So this is the non-pantry kind of storage side of everything. Obviously there's no access to drawers on this end, so not really much to show down here. But on top of here, I am pretty happy with the storage solution that I have on here with the aluminium track on the top. So pretty happy with how that's turned out. I do have this elastic kind of loop over the top here, which did hold the table down, which was fine, worked out well. Same thing with my camp chair there as well. Carl ended up bringing one for me anyway, so I didn't need a camp chair, but that did hold in its place even on the rough tracks and that. I did also find a better way of being able to make the mattress that goes in the rooftop tent a lot smaller, so I'm pretty happy with how that turned out as well. So that kind of just sits a little bit more out of the way now, as opposed to where it was much bigger and it was taking up a whole lot more room. One of the negatives was was my fishing rod holder. Now, I didn't take my fishing rod on this trip because I knew we were going to be short on time. Wasn't really much time to drop a line in. But these fishing rod holders that are, well, this is actually a broomstick holder, but does the same sort of thing, that I made here, where I thought just that piece of Velcro on the top there would, you know, hold up pretty well. Held up well for a few weeks and now it's fallen off. So I do have a plan to put a piece of wood over here, and then that will just kind of, yeah, give me a bit more of a screw point to be able to put those broomstick holders in there, and then it will hold the fishing rods just fine. But yeah, I mean, that was a little bit cheeky of me anyway, just to see if I could get away with doing it quickly and, like I said, cheaply and without much effort. But as I found out, it definitely does require a little bit more effort. So I'm just going to put a little plank over here, just going to screw it straight up into this channel strut bar up here. So yeah, that little channel struts there. So, and yeah, and then that will just kind of sit down a little bit more, which will cut into a little bit more room in here, but I don't think it'll be too much of an issue. I'll really only be carrying my rod. My nephew's rods are much bigger than the length of this anyway. So yeah, I mean, it's really just my rod that will go in there. And who knows, it might add in the future a couple more rods to my collection, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes over time. And if you guys want to see more fishing content, make sure you let me know in our travel video. So guys, apart from that, that's pretty much all I have at this point. I will just double check my notes as we're finishing up. And yeah, and then we'll do a little bit of wrap up as to how everything went on the trip. So to finish up, I really only kind of just realized that I've talked mostly about the touring setup and how that went, and how it needs some fine tuning, but also some things worked really well. In general, how did the 70 series go off-road compared to my Hilux and my Prado builds that I've had in the past? So it was, put it this way, it was a great choice for me to upgrade. I call it an upgrade for myself anyway, but I'd say for most people it would not be an upgrade. But it was definitely a good choice for me to go from the Hilux that I had to this 70 series. I had, you know, and I haven't really talked too much about this, and I will make a video on this one day, add it to the list of videos I want to make. It's all time, isn't it? But like, one of the main things that I had issues with my Hilux was just the sheer amount of off-roading I was doing in that vehicle. And the vehicle really was, I wouldn't say not up to the task, because the engine in it's great. The transmission on it, you know, I've made this very clear in the past as well, that the 6-speed auto transmission is not my favorite one. So I am very glad to have a manual again. But I just definitely found that I had a lot of restrictions with the Hilux, lots of beeping, lots of, like, you know, when there was a lot of dust, for example, it would show the blind spot indicators would go off. So that's another distraction. So I just found there's a lot of things that was taking me away from the experience of driving. You know, it'd always be giving me rest alerts and things like that, which is great to do, but, you know, not really necessary. You know what I mean? Just a lot of that, you know, kind of like technology that I don't really need for myself when I'm going off-road. So what I really appreciate about this vehicle was that I kind of see it now as like a tool. You know, I see it now as like, this was the right tool for the job that I want it to do, which is to go off-road and to just do it well, do it reliably. If there's an error in something that's happening with the vehicle, like say, you know, there's a water crossing that doesn't work out, or there's a, you know what I mean, like that sort of stuff, or like having troubles with it off-road or something like that, there is a 99.9% chance that's going to be user error. That's going to be my error, because this thing is like a precision instrument. You know, it's specifically designed for doing one thing only, that is to be reliable, to do off-roading well, and it's built for that, guys. Like, you know, it's really hard for me to put into words just how handy it was to have a vehicle that had limited technology in it that just did what I wanted to do. I pointed, it shot, it did exactly what I wanted it to do. So I was really impressed with how the vehicle performed off-road. No beeps, no carrying on, nothing. It just got stuck in and just did it. I didn't have things falling off it. I had issues with my Hilux where it had these big flares on it that were plastic, and you know, on my trip up to the Cape, they all got, you know, scratched up and dented with all the rocks being kicked up. Like, this is all aluminium, it's all steel. Like this thing just like gave it a power hose, and I was all right to go to work in it the next day. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I had a lot of issues with paint and stuff on my Hilux. You know, like I just had so many things that would just kind of happen. The Prado, I found the paint was really soft on the Prado, so it scratched really easily. Just lots of little things that I noticed on those vehicles. And they are, don't get me wrong, fantastic vehicles. And we still have a Prado here, and I still may buy another Hilux in the future. But I just kind of felt that for what I wanted to do, which on this vehicle here is like 90% is going to be off-road anyway, and has been off-road. And 10% is just really just me getting to the places, where most people the other way around, where they use it as kind of the daily, and then they do lots of kilometers in it, and then they use it for 5 or 10% off-road. But me, I'm like the other way around. I only use this for the North Oz stuff that I'm doing, which is like off-roading and camping and all that sort of stuff. So that gives you a bit of an idea that for me, just this vehicle in general, the V8 is an absolute powerhouse. It's been great to get to know how to use the manual transfer case. I've never really used one before. I've only ever used the dials and stuff like that on my previous vehicles. So actually being able to use the manual transfer case, getting into low gear, trying to figure out when to use first, second, third in low is pretty interesting as well, and when to use high, which I found using high, you know, 4 high for the river crossings to actually be a bit more beneficial in some aspects. And then I would use the low gearing for when I was like a little bit unsure, and I'd have it in second, and it would just like climb up like sheer faces in first, low gear, and it would just climb with very little to no, you know, accelerator input, and I could just focus on what I needed to, which was just steering the vehicle and making sure it was going where I needed it to. But with the Hilux and the Prado, I was always kind of guessing. I didn't really know where I was at different points in time, just with the technology, and if the locker's engaged. So another thing is that this has an air locker in it, so I put an air locker in this. Well, I got one put in there, so I'm not that, you know, good at installing stuff. So I've got an air locker put in it. It's great. The mechanical lockers I just found were just too unreliable. I'd always be rocking back and forwards and would never go in. And when I'd finish a crossing, then it would go in. So I just really couldn't really get those mechanical lockers to work for me. Again, like sometimes I do it and it activates straight away. So I really don't know enough about the, you know, those sorts of lockers to be able to rely on them, you know, for emergencies, which is when you use a locker, right? So the air locker was great because the second I press the button, it's in, it's done, like it's locked, ready to go. So yeah, really impressed with it. Like probably one of the downsides would be that, you know, you have to get out and lock the hubs manually. So that does take a bit of time. Whereas my mate Carly just kind of, you know, he's always in 4-wheel drive anyway, because it's full-time 4-wheel drive in his Amarok. So those are kind of things where you feel a little bit awkward because you like get out of the car and you're like, you know, manually like, you know, crank starting your vehicle like it's a 1920s, it feels like sometimes. So, you know, that's like something that felt a little bit awkward at times, where it's like other people just have all these things automatically done on their vehicles. But for me, it's like, you know, it's all very manual in this vehicle. But that's something that I appreciate. I like the fact that I can get out of the car and twist it and it clicks and locks in. And I know that everything in this vehicle is no guessing. Like I said, that there was a lot of guessing when it came to my other vehicles, like the Hilux and the Prado. And with this vehicle, when the lock is in, I know it's in. You know, when it's in 4 high, I know it's in 4 high. Also, the traction control in this is amazing. You know, you don't have to, it doesn't interfere as much, which is good, as the newer vehicles do. And then it's just so easy to turn off, and it will stay off. You don't have to type in a special code or hit it 4 times and, do a dance, and spin around 3 times, touch your toes. You press it and traction control goes off until you press it again or turn the car off and on again. And then, traction control will come back on. So, yeah, I mean, the vehicle is just like, I've gone on a bit of a rant at the end of this video, but if we're talking specifically about the vehicle, I've always been a little bit, I'm not too sure if that was the right choice, because it's a bit noisier in here. It is easier to do modifications on this vehicle, which is great. And the seats are a little bit more uncomfortable. And, there's little bits and pieces where you're kind of like, oh, I'm not really sure if getting the Landcruiser was the right choice. But then when I actually took it off-road, then that's when I realized that, yes, no, I absolutely did make the right choice. So I will be doing a follow-up video on a couple of things like the standard bar work and the rear lockers as well, like kind of longer-term reviews on little bits and pieces, which is kind of how this channel all started, was with all the little bits and pieces and reviewing them and stuff. But yeah, guys, if you want to see anything in particular that I've covered in a little bit more detail, please let me know down in the comment section. And thank you again to Magic Mind for helping me make these videos. It's awesome that they've come on board to help out the channel as a sponsor. So guys, apart from that, that's it for now. And I'm looking forward to the next trip where we'll be able to find hopefully some more things to do on the vehicle. And I will be in the meantime sharing with you guys little bits and pieces of some of the fixes that I've mentioned to the problems in today's video. Alrighty guys, thank you for joining me in today's video. I hope you can get out and yeah, find your own adventures as well. Alrighty, I'll see you very shortly in the next video. Take care.